Awesome. Well, I'm glad to be here. I got a super cool founder, Ben, and he's just finishing up his Techstars, the water tech and sustainability. So this is really important to us here at Planetary Health First, Mars Next. Moving that needle. Ben, you want to just introduce yourself real quick before we get going on? I'm so glad you're here.
No. My name is Ben Bickerstaff. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO at Sipp. We're trying to revolutionize how community water works with utilities and community members.
Cool. Well, this is seems like perfect timing. I wish I could be so smart in the PR media content creation where I plan the guests so perfectly, but I would say it's pretty good with where you are. You finished up in December with your Techstars, the WaterTech and sustainability track with Techstars. And tell us a little bit where you are now in that journey and a little bit about Techstars. And I'd also love to know, kind of the pre-AHA, what that was to get this company going. I'm sure it's several years before that, and how you found your other founder, and I'll let you get going.
Yeah. So the Techstars journey has been really great, but it's really kind of this if you're on the last 10 minutes before midnight type deal, right? Like we've been at this for a long time. But overall, since Techstars, like you said, we finished up in December, and we've been in sort of product development mode, just heads down, sleeves up, get stuff done. And we're really gearing up for a really big product launch here. Like the next 90 days to us is pretty crucial of audience development, taking pre-sales, getting product in people's hands. And we're finally ready, or we can be really aggressive about that, where we feel like we can deliver on products when we advertise that they're ready for sale. So that's kind of where we are today. But how we got here is it's been a journey. This was actually a product I started way back in grad school. And it is kind of iterated and evolved and until we got to what we have today. Primarily, let me back up and say I'm an engineer by training, right? An environmental engineer. And while I was getting my graduate degree in environmental engineering, I was also simultaneously getting my MBA. And I worked at what universities call the technology transfer office. And one day these two professors come in and they're looking to sort of start trying to patent a novel ultraviolet light configuration for water treatment. And they're still really early in the process, but they know that they should go and talk to tech transfer offices, because the tech transfer office is who helps you get you protect your intellectual property and move it forward. And my job was to sit in on that meeting and kind of help understand what, if anything, where they should go in these very early stages of the process. The meeting ends with them saying, well, if you've got any students that are any grad students or anything that are sort of business minded but understand this process, we really need some sort of help here. And my hand couldn't have shot up faster, right? I'm like, look, I'm in, right? Like I'm the poster child for this. And that was sort of how I found two of the first co-founders. Was they became my grad school advisors. I needed research hours and to fulfill my degree requirements. And obviously I jumped in on this, and in the early stages of it, we were hyper focused on using UV light to treat drinking water at the point of use. And so for people that don't know, when you treat drinking water, there's really kind of two broad steps you have to take. You have to filter the water and you have to disinfect the water. I think filtering the water is, everybody kind of is familiar with that. I would say like your Brita pitchers or just, activated charcoal or activated carbon filters in, even just a refrigerator. But the second step that happens at the treatment plant that not a lot of people are aware of is the disinfection part, right? And there's only three ways to disinfect water. Is you can boil it, right? Heat it up, burn off all the sort of the viruses and bacteria in it. Use chlorine, or use a chemical. Most of the time that's chlorine. And then you can use ultraviolet light. And so we were looking at how to use ultraviolet light at what is called the point of use, which is a fancy way of saying like where you're going to drink the water. And up until that point, that hadn't been done at sort of such a small scale on what you call flow through basis. As in we don't want the water to stop moving. We want it to just kind of move around the light, and we want it to sort of zap the bad things as it's flowing, through the pipe and out, out the tap. To kind of digress here a quick second and say, up until that point, the point of use, like kind of the consumer facing point of use things had been what you'd call batch treatment, where basically you got to get it into some other receptacle, like a cup or a water bottle or something. And you would have what you would like, basically like an ultraviolet like rod, and you would like stir it really quickly. And, you'd have to do that continuously for like 3 minutes, or maybe it was like a more of the full length of the bottle, and you would like shake it. And that was sort of the solutions. Realistic, and those were well-known products. They were really kind of marketed towards outdoors people, like people that are going hiking or that sort of thing. Maybe you want to scoop up some stream water and just shake it. And so there hadn't really been sort of this redundancy and this added layer of protection in sort of consumer products for the home. And we got really, really, really good results, like a 99.9% reduction in the hardest challenge organism that you could find, which is MS2. And basically the process goes is you contaminate water and then you pump it through your setup. And we got really good results. Like we got great results. And then, the scientific process says, do it again. And so we did it again and again and again. And we kept getting these results. And so our immediate thought was, this is great. We got to get this out to people because it's useful, right? Like it's an additive layer to the process. We can basically bring the 2-step plant treatment process to your home. And that was really cool. For really smart guys, I guess seemingly really smart guys, we came up with lots of dumb ideas from there, like terrible ideas.
Is this like Jeff Bezos that took him forever to get knee pads, or before he built a bench to actually package the stuff when they were on their hands and knees? I don't know. So anyway, I'll stop.
Yeah. Like we this is, I don't want to date myself, but this is kind of in the mid teens here, 2014, 2015, 2016, that we're working on this. And, even still then, like the old school Brita tap attachment was fresh on people's minds, right? Like, and you can kind of remember what I'm talking about, right? You would screw it on and you could twist it, and it would either force the water out the faucet attached filter, or it could just come out through the tap. And we're like, okay, we'll mirror that. And, in hindsight, we're like, guys, we were going to attach a literal light bulb to the end of people's faucets, right? Like that just kind of screams safety hazard. Fortunately, we didn't get too terribly far down that road because we faced all sorts of power issues, as you probably can imagine. Nobody's just going to run an extension cord to the end of their faucet. How do you get this thing charged? How do you keep it charged? All this sorts of fun stuff. But one other thing that this is kind of maybe this is just the nerd in me, but like of sort of product development processes. One other thing that was starting to emerge at that time was there was no standardization amongst faucets like there once was, right? Like in the 90s and early 2000s, where it was going to be incredibly hard for us to have something to actually attach to, right? Because faucets started to become much more fashionable and decorative. And it was about kind of having that rain head faucet or that sort of thing, right? So they had these big heads on them. There was nothing to attach to. And so we kind of figured that out pretty quickly as well. And so from there, we kind of started trying to move on. And honestly, from there, we iterated on some other terrible ideas. At one point, we wanted like a funnel that we put the light into, because the light is like, our configuration was incredibly small and compact. And that was sort of our value proposition, was that it could be combined pretty easily with the filter system, right? Because you need both. You need filtration and UV. And so we iterated through a couple things, and then really kind of the aha moment for me was I had graduated grad school. I had decided to take a full-time job working at the university, realistically, so I could kind of be around the innovation and keep working on these projects with these guys. And I was renovating an old home in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, which is where the University of Alabama is. And one day I had ordered the kit to install like one of those motion detected faucets for, like we're remodeling the kitchen. And so I'm up under the faucet and I'm starting to take all the stuff out, and there's all this sort of hardware that just kind of dangles down there. And I really never kind of thought about it. Like clearly now in hindsight, like there has to be all this sort of stuff to make that faucet, that motion detected faucet work. And that was sort of my aha moment. I'm like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, if other schmucks like me are willing to self-install this sort of stuff, right? Buy it on Amazon, install it. And I was like, why don't we just put all of our stuff down here? Right. And now because we ran into all sorts of constraints, from the faucet constraint, which I already talked about, to do we do like sort of a countertop unit? And trust me, word to the wise people out there, do not try to compete with countertop real estate. You don't want to do it, right? Unless you're like Ninja or some of these well-established, GE or some of these other well-established brands, you do not want to compete with countertop real estate. People like guard that as if it's actual real estate on Fifth Avenue, New York. And so we ran into that constraint. So now we're like, I'm like, why don't we put it below the sink? And then I kind of just, this is how I kind of work, is I just kind of chase these ideas, and I think kind of through trying to think through the full process. And I'm like, but the moment we go below the sink, right? Like we're not much better than some of these other systems, but B, like the user engagement down there is nothing. Like people stick it down there, and I get so worried they just stick it down there. We get one sale and that's done. Right? And I was like, well, how do we get sort of recurring revenue or continued engagement with this? And I was like, well, this was sort of at the height of the ascent of sort of the smart home adoptions, right? Like Alexa and the Google Home stuff was really kind of starting to take off. You kind of had Nest thermostat was coming onto the scene, which had been on the scene, right? But like wide scale adoption was starting to occur. And so I'm like, that's it, right? We put it down there. We put data sensors in there. We should really try to promote people getting water out of their tap, and we can collect the data to validate that it is as safe as we say it is. But also we can now use that sort of drive really cool automations, right? And we found a lot of things out of this. Is we're doing customer discovery, and one of the things is like in America we are stupidly blessed to be somewhat insulated from a lot of these problems of water quality, right? And it's really kind of created this binary. Water is either safe or it's not safe, right? And that's how we as Americans think of it. And then, yeah, exactly, right? And so we think of it that way, and it's either it's like no big deal at all, or it's a massive deal, right? Mm-hmm. And so that there's no kind of in between. So if you are in an area that recently just had, say, like a boil water notice, Austin, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, these are prominent cities that have had to do this, then it might be a massive deal for you, right? But by and large, people like just, we've deemed it not a huge problem. So that's sort of a societal thing. But even if people are going looking for these products, they wanted something that's super convenient, or they want very minimal behavior change, and it needs to be cost effective, right? Because they're not willing to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some people are, but by and large, right, that's not really what's going on. And so as we sort of grown and iterated, we've kind of gone from just treatment to how do we make a smart home device that really kind of checks off all those boxes of safe water, but super convenient and cost effective, to the societal issue that we're kind of framing up is we think that community water systems are fundamentally broken in how they sort of operate, right? And if you think about it, everything happens in sort of this reactive repair type scenario. But the data that tells them to go do that is sick people, hugely damaged infrastructure, or costly home repairs, right? And it's like, in the year of our Lord 2025, why are we relying on those indicators to then go fix things, right? Like how can we create more of a proactive, a preventative approach, right? And the only way to do that is you have to have sort of blanketed data monitoring, right? For your home, and then for your community, the entire service area for your utility. And we had that idea kind of early on, and we really tried to not make hardware, because making hardware is stupidly hard. Like, and we can talk about that here in a second, because there's definitely sort of a tariff angle to that is probably pretty topical. But making hardware is stupidly hard. Making software is not hard, right? Like, you can kind of bribe some developers with a few some pizza and beer for the weekend, and you can hack together a pretty good concept.
Ben, is this from some experience? Maybe
it is certainly from experience. You know, the startup funds, is, can I get some pizza, beer for the weekend, and can we hack something together? And that's not an exaggeration. And so you can hack something together. And what we started to do is start trying to do customer discovery to the utilities themselves. And what we would get told is you're not wrong. We probably do need more proactive data collection so that we can be more proactive in this. But two things we'd always hear: we don't want people to know what's in their water, which I found to be incredibly alarming. Mm-hmm. And two, they're like, we also don't want to know, because the more we know,
then they're liable.
The more we're liable for. Yeah. And I'm not totally absolving the utilities, but they're in a really kind of unenviable position because they don't have the people and they don't have the money and they don't really have the time to go fix all these problems either. And so, and I empathize with that a lot. It doesn't mean we still shouldn't strive for a better system. And so out of that, out of those interactions, we found that utilities, and this is true for water utilities, it's really kind of true for utilities across the board, even power utilities. They do not change except for really kind of two reasons. One, government legislation, that's pretty obvious. Or two, consumer demand, right? And so if all their customers are angry because they're not getting certain value or certain benefits from them, they will make us think about things. And when customers make us think about things to regulators or whomever about somebody that's been given a limited monopoly, that lights a little fire under them. Mm-hmm. And so we tried to sell software to give them better data, aggregation things, and then we would use those as sort of anchor points then to follow on and sell hardware to, right? Kind of almost like raise money with software, get a soft customer base, build some trust with the utility, and then use that as the conduit to sell the hardware. And it just kind of became very, very clear we were not going to do that path. On paper, it makes a ton of sense, right? Mm-hmm. Do the software portion first, hardware portion can follow. But then when you kind of zoom out and think about why they do or don't change, it makes a ton more sense to then come at this from the consumer angle, drive that demand, and try to instigate that change, right? Because if all of a sudden you can tell more people about what's in their water, why they should have sort of this process, and then what the sort of inflection point we're trying to drive, which is being reactive to proactive, so we can prevent as opposed to repair. People can kind of buy into that sort of system, and that's kind of where we are today. Is our vision is, how do we create a more proactive, preventative, operational environment for utilities and their communities? And we divvy that up in kind of three different phases, which is, we call the first one the drop in the bucket. Our goal is just to make Sipp safe devices, get them to people. Anybody who wants to buy one, just get it, right? You are a drop in the bucket for us, and every drop kind of counts. And then we move on to sort of the community pool. How do we pull different devices in sort of these community angles to get trends across the community, so that way you can kind of log on. We're building a dynamic water quality map, which is live today. More of that in a second, but we're building that map to kind of say, so you can see trends or outliers. You can say, is this unique to my home, or is this happening in my neighborhood or community wide? And the final one we call the data lake, which is we're adding several different layers to this community ecosystem, such that we can kind of create an AI event classification system that's utilizing this sort of mesh monitoring network throughout the community, finding out if bad things are happening, classifying them on sort of basically a threat level, and elevating that to the utility or to the homeowner. And so that they can say, is this a low-level threat, high-level threat, right? An example might be pressure dropped in this one home. Well, that could be a low-level threat because maybe that's just something weird with their plumbing and it's not system-wide. But if all of a sudden pressure dropped off an entire street, which is off this one water main, that could be something problematic. We need to send somebody out to take a peek at that. And monitoring with the conditions that create those high-level threats so we can prevent them before they happen is really what we're after. But we don't get there if we don't start where we are today, which is that drop in the bucket. We got to create value for people. And just to kind of put a pin on this, because I'm talking too much, but is we'll start today with our introductory product. We're going to use data to optimize you and your home that can kind of automate sort of the maintenance of our device, make that as stupidly easy as possible. We'll offer a subscription model to get filter replacements and maintenance on that device. Most people do not change their filter like they're supposed to. Like, they just don't. And so when we'll monitor the data for you, we'll ship you replacement filtration and UV cartridges, when the time's right. So that way, you don't have to wonder, when do I replace it? It's just, I replace it when it shows up on my doorstep. And then we also do kind of cool things like whole home leak detection, right? We know what the pressure is coming into the home. The home is subjected to the same pressure throughout the entire, throughout all the access points. So with just one device in your home, we can kind of learn in the background what is and is not a, off cycle pressure drop. Then we can alert you, so that way, you don't come home to, say, a flooded kitchen.
So
and we'll go from there. Yeah, go ahead.
You have, I guess you probably have some thoughts on licensing into, because I'm looking at it from a different point of view, like a consumer. Right now, we know water, gosh, there's such concern. Bottled water is not safe. I know, like Brian Johnson's doing all these, he's starting with all his tests of certain foods, like what's in those foods. I think there's this huge consumer awareness. Are you going to be competing with that, the worried well, or are you? I mean, I'm hearing a lot of systems, a lot of different opportunities from the consumer, but then also holistically with the water utilities. And I guess you have some general hypothesis. How do you test that to know that that's something you'll do, or whether you'll partner with someone else?
Maybe I'm not quite understanding.
I guess the first question, the question I have is, I imagine there's a huge marketplace for getting clean water. Like who are you guys going to be? Or, right now I know as a consumer, I don't, I'm the guy that has the filter that it probably needs to be changed, forgive me, in the refrigerator or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I know right now in my mind, like, I don't want to keep on drinking bottled water. I know I need to drink more water, but I would like to know that my tap water's safe and clean. And I imagine there's a lot of people out there that feel that way. So I would say, from a first basis, is that sort of one solution your product would do? And if so, I imagine there's a bunch of host of competitors for multiple levels of people on that awareness.
Yeah, I think we think of ourselves as a little more of a platform here, as far as, ideally long term, we want to be known less as sort of a water treatment company, more of sort of a data insights company. And I know that sounds weird coming from somebody that's trying to sell you hardware. But the long term thing is we just need to be better at collecting and analyzing data on the operations of our water quality systems. Starting from the consumer side of things is you need to know what the safety and what the quality of the water is in your individual home, right? And so we do that. We can really inform the consumer of that through several different ways. And first of all, by law, because of the Safe Drinking Water Act, is this passed back in the 70s, 80s. Every utility that provides water to people has to collect data and publicize that data on the safety of their water. Every year, every July, they are supposed to send you what is called a CCR, a Consumer Confidence Report. And that's going to tell you detailed data on about 90-ish different contaminants that they're monitoring in your drinking water. Now, they don't exactly shout that from the mountaintops. They put it into snail mail that a lot of people may or may not actually read. And people kind of rip that, it comes in like a little postcard size thing. It's even some of the fonts, like, kind of probably strategically small. And they're telling you kind of what it is. And then if you read it, you almost kind of need to be an environmental engineer to understand what's going on, right? Like, just the one I always give the example I always give to everybody is do you know kind of what, coliform matter is, right? Or fecal matter is, right? And if all of a sudden you read that on it, it's like, well, that's how much parts per million of poop is in the water.
Yeah.
And so, they didn't write it that way. And that's sort of in layman's terms. And so our goal is to be able to take some of that data and bring it into layman's terms and inform people, right? That's sort of step one. Step two is we encourage everybody to test their water and test it frequently, right? There's a lot of sort of third-party options that you can get, like an in-home water sample test kit, where they will mail you like a jug. You fill up that jug, you mail it off to a lab, and they will do a very analytical driven test for you. Our goal is to not necessarily treat those people as competitors, but more as partners, right? Mm-hmm. Can we bring that data in and use our device to monitor against it? That would be what we would love to do. But we also are just giving people sort of these like little old school test strips, right? Like this is kind of sixth grade science class type stuff, but it can be really effective at scale because, it's really kind of idiot proof almost. Really,
it's like a temperature. It's like a temperature.
Yeah.
You just check the person's temperature,
Exactly. And so we do that, and we'll aggregate all that data, and then we build sort of a water quality profile for your home, right? And that's sort of step one for us. But as far as kind of competing against some of these other folks, like I haven't seen anybody that's kind of building that end-to-end system where they're starting with that public data, creating their own data, and then monitoring again, and then have the hardware to sort of monitor against it. But maybe to kind of touch on the bottled water situation for a second is drinking water systems, in my opinion, create sort of primary and secondary problems. Primary problems are what we described earlier, right? Is when you have sick people, damaged infrastructure, or costly repairs to your home, right? That can be really kind of the primary effect of sort of a bad system setup, whether that's from the utility or the plumbing in your own home. The plumbing in your own home can contribute to your water quality as well, right? Like the utility is not all to blame there. But secondary problems are because when people are dissatisfied with the tap, they go look for other options, i.e. say bottled water, right? And we all know sort of the problems that bottled water come with, the environmental hazards alone, right? Like people throw this in landfills, they could end up in oceans and all this other stuff, right? These single-use plastics definitely have problems, which we're now discovering creates the BPAs, and sort of the microplastics, which you should probably, I can introduce you. There was a guy in our Techstars cohort that's making sort of a microplastics filter. He could talk to you about microplastics for days. And the compelling stat he always gave us was that I was like, dude, why don't you tell everybody that? He says, you on average drink or eat a credit card's worth of microplastics. And I'm like, that's compelling, right? Everybody knows what that is.
Like how often?
Yeah, a week.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, a week. So,
Jeez.
We don't want you to have to go to that, right? And
so let's I feel like there's so many roads we could go on this. I love you're here. I think with you as an entrepreneur, scientist, researcher, innovator, and then with the sustainability. Where did you? I know it was a process as a MBA, dual major, but did you 10 years ago, were you interested in water? Just kind of where did this come from and water? How'd you get there?
Yeah, I think I just always had a natural draw to water themed things. Really kind of my internal goal in life is just kind of to help people, right? And then the engineer in me is how do we make technology that helps people? And so then there's obviously not a better way to sort of help people than making sure they have clean drinking water, right? That's sort of, it's really kind of only outranked by clean air in terms of, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? If you don't have clean air, if you don't have air to breathe, well, that's a pretty immediate need. Right behind it is clean water. And so that kind of did that, just to kind of nerd out on you a little bit. I always picked the water themed things as a kid, right? Blue was always my favorite color. I always picked Squirtle instead of Charmander, right? These sort of things. So it's just kind of always been my natural inclination to pick the water themed things. I don't really know why, but it sort of shaped sort of my studies. And in undergrad, we did this project on sort of you had to, it was like an extra credit project. You make a video and talk about a topic you're choosing, and I chose drinking water in sort of Africa or developing worlds. And you kind of find some super compelling statistics on sort of these developing world type problems. And that was sort of my first foray into why is nobody solving this? How do we solve this? Obviously, there's a lot of smart people out there that are taking looks at these sort of things. And that was my first foray into very small scale video editing. It was terrible. I think it finally got kicked off of YouTube. It used to be up, but this was kind of before the whole copyright problems would occur, and so we kind of did some low scale video editing and talked about how you have to create this water infrastructure for people, or else they can't really create civilization, right? You think about kind of some of these folks in Malawi is one of the things we talked about in the video, and you have women that walk on average 3 hours round trip just to get clean water for and what does that do, right? What other things are not getting done because somebody has to go do that. You learn that like 1 out of every 10 hospital beds in the world are occupied by somebody with a waterborne illness at any given time, right? And then you kind of shrink that down to the developing world, and you learn that it creates this sort of vicious cycle, right? Why is people aren't dying because they don't have water, right? When they have that waterborne illness, they have viruses or bacteria contaminating that water, because it's basically like this community urn that people are coming in and dipping stuff out of. They're out in the wilderness, they go hunting or whatever else, they bring back germs, they dip it in there, that sits in the hot African sun all day. It cultures all those viruses, bacteria. People drink that, they get E. coli or, cholera or whatever else it is, right? And then they get really sick and they start losing fluids out of both ends. Not to get too graphic here, right? And so, but when that happens is you become really dehydrated, right? Well, how do you rehydrate? You drink water, but water was the problem in the beginning. And so when I kind of put that vicious cycle together, that was and then marrying that with sort of the disinfectant of UV, I was like, this is it, man. Like if we can kind of pipe that infrastructure into people, that's where I want to go.
Well, I mean, when you really look at our modern, with, the advent of longevity, the beginning of public health, I mean, water quality and cleanliness, just basic sewage and sanitation. I mean, these are connected. So I think what you're doing is super cool, super awesome. I'd love to get in a little more about Techstars, where you're as a founder. I'm sure not only are you working on productization, but also raising some, like what that number is, what kind of investors would you like, or partners as well. I mean, you're at a really super cool point, because any, and I don't know if you've raised yet, but any venture would love to get you early enough, and I know you probably would say, we don't need you, we're working on revenue and we'll talk to you sometime. But, that's a real, definitely hear you're a scientist or researcher, but let's hear a little more about the business and while we're here, just like how you're going to do this and pull this off. Would love to hear that.
Yeah. So, Techstars was great. Two things Techstars does really well. And you kind of get plugged into that Techstars network, which is fantastic, right? And the validation and the credibility that you get from being a part of it really kind of helps make that go to market better, right? You show up and say you're a Techstars company. We peddled this idea obviously for a long time and trying to figure out, get on people's radars to get money even before Techstars. They say, yeah. And then you tell them you're in Techstars and you get a lot more callbacks than you did before. So, that credibility, I think, is really intangible, but it's incredibly valuable. And then obviously the tangible aspect of it is they give you some money, right? And money helps move projects forward. There's just no other way around it. And up until this point, it had kind of been me just kind of grinding it out, saving money, throwing extra cash at it when we could. And that kind of explains some of our long tail development. Is we had to do a lot of customer discovery, like I said earlier about the utilities angle. But when we decided to go all in on the hardware stuff, like hardware is hard because you got all these different you got to build materials and you got to make sure all these things can kind of fit together and come together. And so getting to prototype stage is incredibly hard, but we did that. And I think that really kind of helped us get into Techstars, if I'm being honest, is we kind of had a lot of tangible stuff already done. And then now Techstars is really sort of catalyzing that forward. We were fortunate too to kind of get matching funds from the state of Alabama, and so that really kind of helped us accelerate to a more to where we are today, which is extended our runway a bit and helped us get to like a more refined version 1 of the product, right? Like something that was a little more compact and a little more marketable. Looks like looks a little more like a product as opposed to sort of the Frankenstein's monster that we had before. So all that was great. And so our plan now is like in the next 90 days is we're trying to just get our message up and out, right? basically share what we're talking about today, talk about the vision we have for how we can drive that, be that inflection point for, we almost kind of think of it as like the inflection point is when we became a Sipp safe community, where we're all of a sudden we're collecting and sharing data through neighborhoods and communities with the utilities so that we can work hand in hand to create a more efficient and safe, system. And so that's sort of the vision. And then we're telling people we're starting today, right? Like you can buy our product this, that way. We're launching what we call the What's in Your Water campaign, where people can go type in their address, see the utilities in their area, see what violations or contaminants are in the water, and then we will mail you a test strip. All you have to do is opt into it. We will mail you sort of a little baggie with these sort of things. And launching in a couple of weeks, we'll let you be able to actually just snap a picture of that and get a water quality report based on it. And it's really kind of seamless and quite elegant.
I hope we can have you up on a follow-up on that. I think this would be really super cool.
Yeah, for sure. Right. And we can kind of share some of the data we're collecting. And I think developing those trends just from that alone will be incredibly compelling. And then, what we're trying to do is leverage that into a fundraise. And, I'm learning so much, right, in this process. And, making small quantities of things is incredibly hard. And making large quantities of things is incredibly hard for different reasons. We'll start with the large quantities of things, right? Like, we don't have a manufacturing plant lying around. We don't have all this machinery, right? And if you want to make 1,000 or 10,000 of something, you got to have materials, you got to have people, you got to have machinery to help make you do it or help you do it. And so there's a lot of great partners that you can find that are, CMs or contract manufacturers that you can outsource this to. And, we're identifying those, we're interviewing those, but just in sort of that process, we're learning that that's a 8 to 12 month process minimum. Right. And, they don't want to get started until you kind of put down a deposit that says you're serious about this.
Yeah. Are you, you said that Alabama, you're fortunate to have a match. Any other grants? It seems like there should be so many other grants out there.
Yeah. Yeah. That is grants are definitely part of what I'd call our funding stack, right? Which is short-term, long-term investments. And there definitely is. We just, kind of given the current pause on grant funding, that wasn't really the best time to go after them, but that's changing kind of quickly. And, we just need to kind of get in the pipeline on that. We will definitely be adding federal grants from say the NSF, the EPA, really any other federal agency that we think we can, kind of get funded. And realistically is kind of to fund how we view that is how can we fund maybe sort of small scale pilots of what we deem that Sipp safe community. We're building up that software and calibrating it against the hardware, or we're able to buy and just give, a critical mass of our product, share it throughout the community, collect the data, and do that sort of hand in hand with strategic partners in the utility space. And so we're actively working on that and kind of bringing those players together. We can turn out a grant application like, over a weekend, but when you go and win sort of these big federal money grants, you really got to show that you have the partnerships or the buy-in. This isn't happening, in a vacuum in my garage, for example. Yeah. So it's sort of that sort of process too. I mean, it's a lot of spinning plates, but in the short term, we got to raise private money as well. Yeah. So what we're looking for in that is partners that kind of see. Ideally, we need somebody that's been in the water space, been in the utility space, been in the hardware space, ideally all three of those things. Or maybe it's a small family office type setting where they see the long-term vision, right? And they're not saying they know that this introductory product that we release isn't the end of the road, but more of just like
or even like a corporate venture that sees you as a strategic play, a big corporate whatever, energy, power, utility corp that love to whatever, I guess you have to, So what are you raising right now? Do you have a number? I know you want to be strategic. The little I've done this, it's not a big raise doesn't always mean great as well. You want to be smart, but is there a number you are looking at, or does it depend?
Yeah, I think it depends on a lot of things, but I mean, it's kind of a seed round, pre-series A type situation where, you're looking in the sub $5 million range, right?
Mhm.
Where, and I don't know what the exact number is under that. One of the biggest lessons I think we learned out of Techstars was sort of the been there, done that lessons that you get from other founders or that sort of thing on this fundraising process. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but they'll say the biggest mistakes founders go do on their first raise is they ask for too much money and they don't ask for enough money. And and you see what I'm saying? And so like finding that balance is hard, but the example that I always carry with me is trying to ask for more than the market is willing to give. And you kind of really got to go establish that. That's why this next 90 days to us is so crucial. Establishing the market, being able to show actionable traction metrics, right? Where we're really able to show there is a market for this, there is demand, right? And the investors kind of want you to come to them with the all but the money variables taken off the
or that they'll miss it. If they don't get it, their other competitor down the street is going to get it and they're going to miss out. I mean,
right, exactly. And so, that's sort of, we're doing sort of this song and dance process now where we're reaching out, we're introducing ourselves. We want to get on so-and-so's radar and say, hey, we're doing this sort of 90-day prep before we launch the product. And we'd love to kind of keep you up to date on how that's going. And then, throughout that time, it's about building metrics. And then that way, when we come in a month and a half, 2 months and say, hey, since we last talked, we've gotten 100, ideally, however high this number could go, 1,000 people signed up on the wait list. We're going to be able to fulfill that demand internally through this way, or we can't fulfill that demand because we don't have the money to do it, right? And so, but if we had your money, we could produce it at 5,000 units a month or something.
Well, as we're wrapping up, anything else you'd like to just give a shout out as we come to the end? I really appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, anytime. It was great. And I really appreciate you having me, right? It's kind of a good message to talk about. And it's one that I think a lot of people underestimate, right? And, overall, I think the message I want to leave with people is we're not trying to be the doom and gloom. And if you drink the water, you'll grow a third arm type people, right? Like what we are trying to say is we don't need to wait for massive infrastructural failures to happen before we take action. Or you don't want to wait for, class action lawsuits because people have been drinking latent chemicals in the water, and all of a sudden you got some rare form of cancer, right? We don't want to necessarily be the sky's falling type people, but we are saying we don't have to wait for those things either, right? Let's sort of drive that inflection point and get a better system today that's more convenient and safer for you, but also creates a safer tomorrow. And that's, I think, is really kind of our message.
And how do people find you, Ben? If they're interested in talking more or writing you a check potentially, what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, you can always check out our website, sippsafely.com. That's SIPP. And I guess I probably should have led off with that. SIPP is, you can see it on the screen, but it's not just your trendy startup name with an unnecessary double letter, but it's an acronym, which is simple, insightful, proactive protection, right? And that's what we want to do. But sippsafely.com, SIPP safely. And you could kind of track our progress from there.
Awesome. Well, it's been so good. And I hope we can have you on again to talk more about this. And also maybe that, the mail in where you check your water with the, whatever that whatever sort of like when you check the chlorine on the pool or whatever that is, something similar technology, your litmus test. So
yeah, for sure. That's exactly what it is, litmus test.
All right. Well, this has been awesome, Ben. So glad you were here today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.